It's time to open up the mailbag. I'm going to be answering your questions on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Marlins. I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. Go hit me up over on X at Jeremiah Geiger 2. Thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you haven't done so, go to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment down below. And today's show is a mailbag episode. I'm going to be getting into all the questions you asked me over the last couple days. I'm going to try to answer every one of them. But first, I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. There were a lot of questions about the Marlins, big league team, and also the prospects. So what I've done is I've broken down all your questions into two segments. First segment, I'm going to be addressing the major league team. I had questions about Sandy Alcantara. I had questions about Jonah Bride. And the second segment, which there were a lot of people who wanted to know my thoughts on the farm system and individual prospects like Jacob Berry or Carter Johnson. I'm going to be diving into that in the second segment. So the first question of the day comes from Alex Greenberg. He's a Braves fan, but he knows baseball, he knows the Marlins, and he frankly likes Sandy Alcantara, and I don't blame him. I like Sandy Alcantara too. He says, what kind of impact do you see Sandy making this season? I think immediately the response is a huge impact, both for himself and for the Marlins. I had a Sandy Alcantara episode a couple days ago where I touched on the fact if he pitches well enough, I expect him to be immediately on the trade block. And I think Sandy Alcantara, coming off of Tommy John surgery, around baseball, there might be a question mark surrounding him. I don't think there's a question mark in the Marlins organization. He's been healthy for a while. He's a bulldog on the mound, and he's going to give you the absolute best he can bring every fifth day. So the impact he has on the Marlins is huge. To be that leader, to be that mentor in the Marlins clubhouse with that pitching staff who is young right now. Sandy is the clear-cut ace. There's no doubt about that. Opening day against Paul Skeens, it's going to be one of the premier matchups of the entire season, pitching matchups rather. So I can't wait for his return. I think he has a huge impact on the Marlins team the first half of the season. Now, will he be here for the second half? That's the question, because I got another question from Eric Bolanos. He says, can you see Sandy getting traded at the deadline if he's pitching well? And what would you think the package looks like? Eric, here's my thing with Sandy Alcantara. I love him as a fan. He's one of my favorite players. But for the Marlins organization, I know how they operate. And if they get an opportunity to flip him at the deadline for a prospect haul, that's what will probably happen. If you want to hear more in depth about my thoughts on Sandy and the trades, go check out my previous video. I'll leave a tag up below. And the return Sandy would get, given that he has multiple years of control, it's not just this season, it's not going to be a rental. I think you would see 2 or 3 top 10 prospects in an organization head back to Miami. Will that include a major league player? Is one of them a major league ready player? I don't know. I don't know the Marlins approach, but the profile that a Sandy Alcantara gives you in a trade return is going to be huge. Superstar type profiles, top 100, top 50 prospects. That, to me, is what I would be expecting for the Marlins to even consider a trade. Because much like Jesus Luzardo, they don't have to trade him this year. He's not a rental. He has more years of control. Now, the salary is getting a little high. And for the Marlins, that can be a problem. But for the rest of Major League Baseball, if you want Sandy, it's going to take an absolute overpay, in my eyes, to get him because there's no rush to trade him. When I say overpay, it has to be a trade. Let's say he goes to the Dodgers, just for example's sake. The Dodgers have to feel pained to part with the prospects they're giving up. If he goes to the Rangers, the Astros, whatever contender at the deadline calls up Peter Bendix and says, "Hey, we're interested in Sandy," the Marlins have to stand their ground and accept nothing less than an overpay. It has to be a gargantuan return in terms of prospect capital. And for me, I would like to see it headlined by a can't miss prospect close to Major League ready who can step into Miami and make an impact. That's further down the road, right? The point being, Sandy Alcantara, when healthy, is one of the best starters in baseball. And the Marlins have to recognize that, and they have to treat him like he's a Cy Young winner, which he is. You can't just trade Cy Young winners for pennies on the dollar. Next question comes from Jonah Bride. Comes from Eli Sussman about Jonah Bride. What should our expectations be for Jonah Bride? Didn't hit at all in 2022, 2023, but had a great second half of 24. Much different results and similar sample sizes. That's a great question because I'm curious as to what Jonah Bride truly is. He struggled in Oakland immensely, comes over to Miami last season. He's in AAA, gets called up. He really went off when he was here. Now, it was only in 70 games. That's the small sample size we're talking about. It's only 70 games. So I'm curious to see how he looks like over an entire season, over that 162 game grind. I think our expectations for Jonah Bride should be slightly tempered just because we haven't seen him hit consistently over a full season. 70 games is great, but it's not 140 games. And the more major league pitchers see him, they're going to figure out tendencies in his swing. He does have questions defensively. He's not the best defender, but I like what he brings to the Marlins lineup in 25. I'm excited to watch Jonah Bride. He's one of my players entering the season, entering 2025, where I'll be watching for his development. Can he provide offense consistently? Is that power here to stay? Because we saw glimpses of it during his time here last year. So Jonah Bride is definitely a player moving forward that the Marlins might not build around, but he can provide adequate at-bats, great power if he taps into it fully, and might be somebody that they would consider moving at the deadline, pure hypothetical standpoint, if he has a good first half. He's older, 29 years old. He's not a building block of this team, but I'm hoping he can continue his trajectory of being a very solid player on a rebuilding team. The next segment is going to be all about prospects and the farm system. I haven't touched on that during my time here, during this first week on the podcast, so I'm excited to get into these questions you guys have left me for individual prospects coming up right after this. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, 2 days away, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million subscribers and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game, where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. Fast, safe withdrawals. When you win, your cash is in your account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. That's a tongue twister. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game, game time. Entering the second segment, I want to remind you, leave your comments below, subscribe. I'm going to be here every single weekday bringing you the best Marlins content I can. And thank you. Thank you again for being here with me. Thank you for all the questions you guys have submitted. The first question comes from William Garcia. What players in the farm system right now should we look for this season? Who could have the biggest jump in their progression this year? My favorite prospect coming into this season is Jared Cerna. Jared Cerna, for me, came over from the Yankees. He's not the headliner of the trade. A lot of people are talking about Agustin Ramirez. He's a shorter frame kind of guy, doesn't have outstanding tools, but the man can hit. The man can flat out hit, and he has extra base power. I believe he had about 38 doubles last season in the minor leagues. He's advanced. He is somebody who I could see possibly making his debut in the second half of next season. If he continues his consistency at the plate, I could see Jared Cerna making his debut. He's an infield type. The other player that I see could have a big jump in their progression, and this is somebody who I touched on yesterday's podcast, is Starlin Caba. He struggled with contact in single A after hitting the ball really well in rookie ball. But the glove's there. The bat, he has the discipline, the advanced approach at the plate. Starlin Caba, if he struggles in single A last year, I'm hoping that's an aberration. And given more time at the level, he's a young guy. I want to see him progress well throughout that level of the minors. Next question comes from, did Miami Sports flip the M today? Will Jacob Berry and Joe Mack get a shot in the majors this year to see what they have to offer? So ironically, I think Jacob Berry will. I don't think Joe Mack will. I still think they want Joe Mack to have this entire season to develop as a hitter. Last year, he broke out. He had a great season. Let's see what he does his second season coming off that really productive year. Jacob Berry got called up to AAA. He's the player I feel the worst about, honestly. I feel higher about Joe Mack than I do Jacob Berry. But I think the Marlins will give Jacob Berry a shot again in the second half of the season. That's my prediction on that. The FAU Burner says, what prospects call up are you most excited for? Is there anyone outside of Sandy with all-star potential? So for the prospect question, the call-up I'm most excited for, there's no guarantees, of course, but if Jared Cerna possibly gets called up, I'm going to go back to that one. I'm excited for him. I think he could be an above average everyday second baseman for the Marlins. Will he get called up? Maybe. I don't know. It just depends on his development this season. And is there anyone outside of Sandy with all-star potential? You've heard me talk about him before. Xavier Edwards is somebody I feel who could be an all-star this season. It's going to be tough with all the shortstops in the National League, but in terms of potential and skill set, I love what X brings to the table. I think he's somebody that could have all-star aspirations this season. William Corpus, I know it's still early in his career, but what do you think of Carter Johnson? First real question about a draft pick that happened last season. Carter Johnson, shortstop prospect, coming over from a high school in Colorado, didn't really produce at all in single A. He struggled at the plate, but it's so young. He's so young. It's such a such a culture shock coming from high school baseball to minor league baseball. And with such a small sample size, I tend to throw that out the window for a player who just got drafted last season. Carter Johnson, I loved that pick. I thought it was a great selection by the Marlins front office and Frankie Pilieri running that director of scouting over there and the whole operation. They paid above and beyond. They paid him more than slot value, above slot value for Carter Johnson. Carter Johnson, does he stick at shortstop? I don't know. Starlin Caba, of course, is the main shortstop prospect. Could Carter Johnson move to second or third or a corner outfield spot? It's so early in his development. But from everything I've seen, he has a really advanced feel at the plate. And you could see a big season from him in power. You could see the contact is there just by his scouting reports and what he did in high school. There's a lot to dream on with Carter Johnson. I think he's a player who the Marlins are going to take his development very slowly, but great question bringing up a prospect that just got drafted and is about to start his first full season of professional baseball. Nick Reddington says, how long can the Marlins realistically stay in the playoff picture before becoming sellers? So this isn't a prospect question, but Nick, the answer is not very long. And I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist at heart, especially with this team, but I just have a real tough time projecting this team to be competitive for very long. I don't see them with a winning record at the end of April. It's a brutal start to the season. The schedule is tough. You know, I predicted the first 30 games earlier, they would go 10-21. So if my prediction comes right, then I think you can safely say by the end of April, they'll be out of contention. So, and the final question I'll get to right here is, when the two worst teams face off opening day, a battle of the Bucks and Marlins, two of the cheapest teams in the league, who wins the series? That's from J412. Well, yeah, the both teams are pretty cheap, right? And the Marlins and Buccos, they're going to be facing off in the opening day series. Of course, I'm going to say the Marlins are going to win the series. But the first game of the season is the true must-watch for any Marlins fan out there. Sandy Alcantara versus Paul Skeens opening day pitching matchup. It's going to be absolutely awesome. It's going to be awesome to see for all of baseball. So let's go Marlins in that opening day series. Of course, I want these guys to win. It's just I have a tough time seeing how this team can stay competitive for very long in what is a loaded National League. FanFest is coming up this weekend. We have new City Connect uniforms. I'm going to talk about that coming up after this. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out all the extra stuff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Whether that's going to the Super Bowl, whether it's a sports game, a concert, or a comedy show, finding the right ticket at the right place can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. When you browse through the deals, it's simple. You can find great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The Super Deal is especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features, like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout, makes the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gives you total peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into Locked On Marlins. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Leave a like, leave a review, leave a rating. The comments are always open if you're on YouTube. And the Fan Fest event will be happening this weekend at Marlins Park tomorrow, Saturday. Get out there if you can. I unfortunately cannot. But for those fans who live in South Florida, get out there, meet the players, have a good time. Because ultimately, baseball's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy watching the Marlins, enjoy following this team. I know on the field, the Marlins might not make us extremely happy last season and probably this season. But, when the Marlins put on an event like this, it's a great opportunity for fans of all ages to go out and meet their favorite players. Sandy's going to be there. There's going to be the new acquisitions. Eric Wagman's going to be there. Matt Mervis, Jared Cerna, who I've talked about, will be there. So get out there, enjoy FanFest, enjoy everything it entails, see the ballpark, and it's free. The best part about it is that it is free to go to. And of course, another exciting moment during this time will be the release of the Marlins' new City Connect uniforms. Now, the Marlins' old City Connect uniforms were pretty popular. They were pretty popular with the fan base, and a lot of people bought merchandise. I wasn't a huge fan of those City Connects, the Sugar Kings. That was just a personal preference. I think the Marlins are going to come out with something to do with the 1997-2003 color scheme. Something teal, something black and teal, paying homage to those old Marlins teams. And maybe, just maybe, it will come with an announcement that Mr. Marlin himself, Jeff Conine's number, will be retired this season. The first Marlins uniform number to be retired. It's a possibility. Stay tuned with everything to do with FanFest this weekend. I got a couple more questions before we wrap up the show. This one comes from Cade Ninehammer. He says, how many seasons do you think it will be before we see the full benefits of this rebuild? That is a great question, Cade, because that is a question that I wonder. That is a question that so many fans want to know. We hate losing. When is it going to stop? Is it 2026? Should we expect a winning season in 2027? Should we expect the 90-win division chasing team that's ready to win a World Series then? It seems so impossible right now, given the state of this organization. But when you look at what Peter Bendix is doing, it's clear he's building for the future. They're not going to come out and say it, and I wish he would. I wish there was just transparency between ownership, the front office, and the fans. We're not going to be good this year. The Marlins are not going to compete till when? When's our plan? When is the plan in action? Everything is kind of kept under wraps. I think the Marlins will show signs of progress in 2026. And when I mean signs of progress, that's saying the individual players who will be here. I had to drink some water there. The individual players who will be here, the next core is going to start to make their mark in Miami. They're going to be young. This team is young right now. Right now, this team is about young players' progression. It's about the Davis and De Los Santos, Agustin Ramirez, Connor Norby, Otto Lopez. Can Griffin Conine stick out there? They have a bunch of young players, and they want to find out who can be a part of the next core of Marlins players. I think Connor Norby is. I think I have a lot of hope for Agustin Ramirez and Davis and De Los Santos. And then you look at in the prospect system, the minor league system, you see Thomas White, Noble Meyer. They're still young. They're not ready to debut for another couple years, most likely. So 2026 is when I want to see progression. When I would be happy with a 77 win season, because that would be my expectation. Slight progression in the win-loss total, Not a playoff contender yet, but on the right path. 2027 is when I expect a lot of these young pitchers and a lot of these position players to start making their mark, debuting, and the big league organization will reap the benefits. I could see Thomas White debut in 2027. I can see Starlin Caba, if he progresses really well, maybe making his debut in the second half of 2027. And this is in addition to Connor Norby. This is in addition to hopefully what is Augustin Ramirez behind the plate or Davison De Los Santos at first, and they've settled into a major league role. So it's a combination of guys we're going to be seeing here in this year and minor league prospects who are still far away from the major league team. I think that if you're a Marlins fan, you have to understand that this is a rebuild that takes time. We've seen it with the style of trades. Luis Arias trade, getting back Dylan Head as the prize jewel of that trade. He's years away. Jesus Luzardo getting back Starlin Caba. He's years away. We had the deadline. They sold off a ton of major league talent. They're still inactive in free agency, which makes me wonder, is there going to be a year coming up? Is it 2026, heading into 2026, when you sign a free agent who you can add to your core of Norby and the players that will eventually come up through the minor league system? Because I think that's an important part that needs to be talked about. You want to build a competitive team. Not all these prospects are necessarily going to hit. Not all these prospects will pan out here. Maybe they'll be traded. Maybe you make a trade for a major league position player. Prospects are tools you use. The Braves do this so well. The Astros do this so well. You have to utilize prospects. It's not just about hoarding them. That's what the Orioles have done for many years, is they have this huge farm system, but I get the sense that they tend to hoard their prospects. They're not willing to make trades with their prospects to acquire big league talent. Will the Marlins do that when they're ready to compete? I don't know. Will they sign a free agent or two when they're ready to compete? Maybe a year early, get them in the organization and establish, hey, this is our new core that we got going on here. It's going to be interesting to see over the next couple years where this happens, because where the Marlins are in their farm system, it's deep. It's a very deep farm system, but it's not elite. They don't have that top end superstar like the Rays did with Junior Caminero, or the Brewers did with Jackson Chourio, who comes up at 19, 20 years old and is immediately making an impact. There's a ton of players in the Marlins system who I'm excited to watch and track their development. But I still think that Peter Bendix and the front office know they need to make a jump in terms of quality. Like a true star needs to come into Miami. I hope they know that, because I know that, and a lot of you guys know that. There just isn't that superstar right now. Even though Peter Bendix says Starlin Caba is a superstar profile, he's not. But that being said, there are so many other teams around them that also have good farm systems. So you can't rely on just the farm in order to compete. So long story short, I've kind of gone long-winded with this response, and thank you for the question, Cade, is that in order to compete, when the young guys who pan out are ready to debut, Thomas White, Starlin Caba, Noble Meyer, I think that's 2027. I think you see progression in 2026, and if they spend money heading into 2027, then maybe you couple that with the prospects, you couple that with the guys who have been here, like Connor Norby and Davison De Los Santos, Augustin Ramirez, guys who have kind of gotten their development time here in the major leagues. You sign some free agents, you make a couple trades, this team could compete in 2027. I think that's what they're going to be shooting for. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Marlins. Thank you, everybody, for listening. A reminder, leave a comment down below. And as always, stay safe and let's go fish.